Hello, welcome to Books and Brews,
the place where beer and literature meet.
With your host, certified Cicerone Michael Agnew.
And Laura Vosica, author of the Bluebells Chronicles.
Each month we invite a guest author to read their words and talk about writing while sipping beers specially paired with their work.
Today's guest is Marion McCarthy.
So sit back,
pop a cold one,
and dive into some books
and brews.
I'm going.
You're going.
Here's my stopwatch.
We're going. So, everybody, welcome to episode 36.
36.
So, 36.
On the top of my pages.
We've done too many of these, and so I can't keep track anymore.
But you know what? That just makes me realize it went over our head. We're wrapping up the third year before an episode.
Oh, yeah, we are. This is the wrapping up the third year.
Congratulations. We should
the podcast version.
Yeah.
Before we get started, we were talking about, Marion and I were talking about back in the old days of doing it on the radio and how I got into it to begin with when your publicist called me and said, we're doing this thing really early in the morning. You want to come and bring some coffee beers?
See, if someone called me and said, I'm a complete stranger, we're doing this thing really early in the morning, I would have hung up on them. I don't do really early in the morning. Boot camp for 3 weeks, never again.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Actually, I'm lying. I kind of like being up at 5 a.m.
Yeah, 5 a.m. is maybe a little early, but I get it.
I love the feel in the air at 5 a.m., but, I'm never motivated enough. It's only like I can't get up and I go, wow, I'm really glad I couldn't sleep. So how was your month, Michael?
Pretty good.
Yeah?
I couldn't tell you what I've been doing, but I've been busy.
Well, see, that's why
I don't know what I've done.
I'm glad to hear that because I'm always embarrassed that, I actually take notes and it's so funny down and I start writing these up and I go, what have I been doing all month? I'm crazy busy, but doing what? So, but because
I'm really scattered right now because there's not like a big project that I'm working on. It's a bunch of little things.
Oh, yeah.
This
that's
little thing,
my life.
this little thing, and this little
Yeah.
thing. So it's hard to kind of maintain track of all
right.
of it.
Well, for us, it was one big thing. We went to Florida, celebrated our first anniversary, so that was pretty
wonderful.
And we went to Panama City Beach. We've been times now, and so we went jet skiing, and that was. I realized as I become older, I'm becoming a complete coward. I was terrified because all I could think was we're jumping over these waves, and I'm flying up off the seat and landing. And all I'm thinking is, if I fall in there, how big are the sharks, and how long do I have to get back before the alligators get me? And so it was these, couple of young guys. Of course, I'm getting to that age where everyone's a young guy to me. But and they're like, don't worry, the sharks are only about that big. They won't take more than over two. So they had fun teasing me. And then, our dramatic story on the way back was we were supposed to drive into Winterset, Iowa to see my son. And we would have gotten there right about 4:30 in our RV. And that's right when that big tornado hit Winterset, Iowa.
Oh, no.
Luckily, we had arranged with my son that rather than driving half an hour off the highway because we were making such a long drive, they would come out to meet us. And so we were sitting in the parking lot of a restaurant right by I-35 waiting to meet them and hearing, this tornado that the weather radar looked like it was going to just miss. It hit Winterset and it actually damaged houses of a couple of people they know, probably both of them quite severely. So we kind of dodged a bullet there.
Yeah.
I live in Oklahoma, so we're used to that, but it's
you would be
devastating.
Yeah. Well, it was ironic because I've spent many years in Minnesota, both in high school and again when I moved back as an adult. I've never known a single person personally whose house was damaged by a tornado. I mean, we lost a couple of trees in one. We lost power twice for like a week at a time. but I've never actually known personally anyone whose house was damaged. And then this one.
I have a good friend of mine who had the roof taken off her house in that tornado that went through North Minneapolis a few years ago.
Which, do you remember what year that was?
Oh, no, it was like 6 years ago or something like that.
I think I know which one you're talking about. I think we lost some power on that one too.
Her neighborhood is amazing because you used to drive it up to her street and it was lined with big trees.
Mm-hmm.
And then like that, after that day, it was bare.
Trees. Yeah, I take it back. This is an irony. I actually do know someone whose house was damaged quite badly by a tornado. And the irony was she lives in the Pacific Northwest in Washington State.
Yeah.
Tornadoes just don't typically go through.
No.
It's like, of all the people I know whose house is damaged, Washington State, like the far northwest of Washington State. So have you read anything today, Michael, or this week?
No. I don't know. So there was this period of time where I was reading like crazy. I was just constantly checking new books out of the library, and then that just ended.
Well, I can't say I've got you covered this week, this month. What am I talking about? Unless it counts that I actually read the whole book, because a lot of times, like, I've read part or most of a book. This time I've read almost all of it. So I happen to have a copy. This is kind of exciting. It's called Mountain Rescue by Shelley Owen with Mary Owen Grimm and Bruce Owen. And this is actually a wild story. I had gone out to Oregon to meet my favorite author of my favorite childhood book. And her name is Margaret Anderson. And while I was out there, we got an Airbnb with Shelley and Bruce Owen. And we got to talking, found all these similarities between us. And she found out I write. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm writing a book. And she started telling me this story. And so that was like 3 years ago in 2019, almost 4 years ago. And so the book is now done. And it's the story of how their daughter went up on Mount Hood alone. And she was determined to make the summit. Very adventurous, great outdoors skills, thought she could just get up there, make the summit, come down. And instead, she ended up caught on Sandy Glacier for 6 days. Found her. Yeah, and it was one of those where in the book, Shelley says, they had all these dogs out, and I later realized 6 days, they didn't expect her to be alive. Those were cadaver dogs. By quite an amazing miracle, they found her because the helicopter saw like a sleeping bag imprint at the top of the mountain at the summit, footsteps leading straight down to her. And so they picked her up and they said, we found you because we saw where your sleeping bag was and your footsteps leading down. And she said, I never made it to the summit. And, nobody's been up there because clearly nobody had walked from the summit down to her. Right. So it's a pretty much a miraculous rescue that shouldn't have happened. She shouldn't have died. But amazingly, she not only was alive, she made a full recovery. Apart from her toes are a little sensitive to the cold now.
Wow.
Despite the frostbite and everything, she made a full recovery. So it's an amazing story that I highly recommend.
That sounds like a great book.
Yeah, it is a good book.
It's not Into the Wild, which we know had such a. And then there's another book that just came out called Lost in the Valley of Death, and it's about an outdoors guy who's very, very skilled, and he just keeps looking for the next challenge, and he goes into the Parvati Valley in India, and he never comes out, and it's the story of what happened, and it's very compelling, those stories. I'm glad your friends are all right.
It must have been a little bit recreated by what they could guess happened. If you never know. Okay. That sounds fascinating.
So, Laura, who's our guest?
Well, I'm going to put on my glasses. I get these from their readers from the dollar store because I lose them. So these are the rhinestone ones.
Lovely.
So if you want to start singing like a rhinestone
quite the fashion gem you are.
I try. You can do a lot at the dollar store. So we have with us today Marion McCarthy, and Marion McCarthy is a novelist with a long career as a freelancer, corporate communications consultant, technical copywriter, columnist, ghostwriter, editor, and writing teacher. Busy. So Murder in the Mortician is the first in the Last Responder mystery series featuring psychic mortician Perrie Spock. When Perrie discovers the body of a young woman on the driveway of her funeral home, Perrie begins to hear stories only the dead can tell. It's the medium meets 6 Feet Under, which I have to admit, I've never watched or read the medium or 6 Feet Under, so the reference was lost on me, but
They're TV shows.
when it comes to TV, I pretty much live under a rock. So.
Oh, okay. And they're old TV shows, so
Okay. So what's our first beer?
First beer is Surly Darkness. Darkness from Surly Brewing Company is their annual great big gigantic imperial stout.
Oh.
And Laura, you have the flavored versions of it. I think they're all 3 different flavors. The red one might be the original. I'm not sure.
So I got all 3 and they're all 3 the wrong ones.
Yeah, one's barrel aged. Yeah, and I can't read what the others are.
Oh, let's see. Barrel aged, Midnight Manhattan, and blueberry crumble.
Blueberry.
Okay, so you don't have the original. I was thinking of the original, but I'd go with the barrel aged. You might like it.
Barrel aged. Okay, I was going to drink all 3, and I had a whole here to soak up all the beer I was going to drink tonight.
Yeah. So I went with this beer because there was one quote in this reading that stood out to me, and that was "Darkness reveals truth." And so I knew it had to be a really black, heavy, dark beer. And then it's got the name Darkness. So how can you not pair that with this reading? And I think there are some people. So this used to be a big cult beer. I mean, people would literally follow the delivery trucks around on the day that Darkness came out.
That's the title for a book right there.
As many bottles as they possibly could. I mean, it was insane. So I think there are a lot of people who, at least back in the day, would have thought that this beer was some sort of revelation of truth. But it's big, it's black, it's malty, it's roasty. It's got nice piney, resiny hops to it. People like to age it, but I think they're stupid for aging it, because once you age it, that great piney hop character goes away, and it really doesn't age particularly well. I don't think it's a beer that should age well, but it doesn't. So to all you people out there, all you Darkness agers, just drink it.
I'm holding up these cans because the pictures on them are, whoops, I keep expecting it to act like a mirror and a camera doesn't.
No.
So those pictures are kind of cool. So I'm going to try 2. And how are the barrel aged and the, what was the other one? How are these going to compare to what you have?
So I don't have any of them. I'm drinking something completely different because I don't have any of our beers today. I'm drinking a delicious wine barrel aged Baltic porter from Minneapolis Town Hall Brewery.
Okay, so I tossed.
It's the right color. It's dark.
Remember what the red one was?
The red one was Manhattan.
Midnight Manhattan. So what I'm trying right now is the barrel aged.
So it's bourbon barrel aged typically.
This is in my top 5.
I was going to say, this is going to be your beer, particularly the barrel aged. You're going to like the barrel aged.
This is really good. Oh my gosh.
Need another sip, right?
Well, I've got a lot of beer to get through here because I also have versions of the Agave.
Yeah.
So this one is the Midnight Manhattan.
So that's going to be based on a Manhattan cocktail.
I like those.
I like that one too, but in a different way. I think you're right. I do like the barrel aged better.
Yeah, that's going to be your beer. That barrel aged.
Yeah.
Darkness is right up your alley.
And I see my dog has inadvertently contributed
A wolfhound hair, right?
wolfhound flavored
Oh,
stout aged
love it.
barrel aged darkness. Yeah. All right. So let's hit it with the first reading.
Perrie Spock was a woman who, even after caring for hundreds of corpses, could sleep soundly by night and awaken promptly at dawn. Sleep was her refuge. She prepared for it as a priest might prepare for Mass. Fresh linen, a pitcher of water, a goblet of her favorite Malbec, a prayer. Then she switched off her bedside lamp, surrendered her thinking brain into the world of dreams, and drifted into slumber as easily as a swimmer might slip into the deep pool of calm water. But in the wee hours following the autumnal equinox, something startled her awake. She thought of the Joy Harjo poem about being afraid of the dark. The dark, according to the poem, made everything visible. Perrie could relate. She'd grown up in this house, here at the historic Rose Funeral Home, where her family had cared for the dead. Now she was in charge, and she was the resident funeral home owner. A warm September breeze wafted through the open window, but her skin erupted in goosebumps. She was only feeling the chill of Mabon, her Aunt Azalea would say, referring to the autumnal equinox that marked the season of harvest and Thanksgiving in the ancient calendar. Perrie shivered in her cotton gown, got up and closed the window. Shrugging into her robe, she padded down the hall. She peered into her parents' old bedroom. The old four-poster bed was neatly made, no longer required, as both her parents were now at eternal rest. In the guest room, a breeze through the open window lifted the white curtains in a ghostly dance. Other than that, nothing. Perrie switched her phone to flashlight mode and tiptoed down the creaking front staircase. Moonlight shone through the open drapes, outlining a neat reception desk in the front hall. The double pocket doors to the parlor viewing room were open, the room freshly dusted and vacuumed after the Satterfield viewing the day before. Everything seemed in order, but Perrie still felt something was amiss. She flipped on the lights, and the basement staircase blinked and made her way downstairs. The morgue, laboratory, and embalming room were clean and intact, just as Maria had left them. Perrie opened the large cooler where old Mr. Cadillo had been placed yesterday, waiting to be embalmed. He was there, peacefully undisturbed. Next to Mr. Cadillo was that poor little Wembley boy who fell from the tilt-a-whirl in the creaky old carnival that came to town last weekend. Perrie touched the boy's bruised forehead, wishing that the carnival had stayed away, wishing that the father hadn't given his 5-year-old son a ticket to ride at the last minute. She'd never been afraid of ghosts. The dead, she knew, didn't stir, and the spirits of Mr. Cadillo and Tommy Wembley had departed their interim resting place. But something, somewhere out there, had sent her senses on alert, waiting to find out what was happening during this witching hour of the morning. Perrie turned off the security alarm and opened the heavy front door. As she bent to pick up the newspaper, her eye caught something at the far end of the front driveway. A trash bag? A fallen tree branch? She made her way down the front steps in the indigo light. As she drew closer to the object, she recognized the lifeless shape of a body. Instantly, she took her cell phone from her bathrobe and turned on the flashlight. A thin woman lay on the concrete, her neck bent at an unnatural angle, her mouth slack and gaping in a soundless scream. Perrie knelt before the body, felt the neck for a pulse, and dialed 911.
So this was a fascinating reading. I mean, how can it not be, right? With crawling through the morgue and all of this, the dead bodies. No, luckily, shortly before we went on, I had this set of questions, but then I was reading the sample on Amazon, and I read a disclaimer at the front, and I was like, man, I have to change up the questions I'm asking.
Oh, okay.
You made a fascinating or funny, depending how you want to look on it, disclaimer. And that is that in real life, you could never have a funeral home, a morgue, and what was it, the autopsy clinic for the medical examiner?
The morgue and the autopsy, yeah.
Right. Plus, I believe she lives in a house that's on top of all of this. she's just wandering around her house at night, and there are these dead bodies in her face. Excuse me, there's the beer speaking. You know, and you said to the reader, in real life, this could never happen. And you've been advised by professionals that it would be both illegal and highly unprofessional to let your children help you with dead bodies, which I got a kick out of. But it brought up a really good question. You said, you know, to your readers, so can you just suspend the disbelief?
Yes.
You know, like in today's day and age, everyone's going to flood you with letters. That couldn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, suspend your disbelief. Well, in this case, I found it easy to, because this story is sort of based on this premise of these Romani families coming and going for that great Oklahoma land grab in, you know, 18, whatever that was. And then they had to build their own funeral home because they weren't allowed into the other ones.
Right.
So to me, I thought you covered it well. And yeah, it's true, that wouldn't be allowed today. But what is your opinion as an author of where this line is? I mean, I write time travel.
Yes, I know you do.
Believable. How do we suspend a reader's disbelief when we're saying something that's blatantly untrue? What is your best advice on how we do this?
Well, I had a couple of beta readers who are morticians, and one in particular is also a psychic. And she advised me that the rules are very strict. You know, she wants to maintain those two things separately and still be a licensed mortician and not have any supernatural things or any doubts about her professionalism. And so I thought, I'm just going to address that up front. So anybody who's reading this and thinking that it's going to be a true view of how mortuaries work and how the funeral business works, it's a little bit different. And I thought I made up the town, called it Vardo, Oklahoma, named after the big gypsy wagons. I made up a Native American tribe that was there, that the Romani people, instead of kicking them out of the land, they allied with them, and they discovered that they have very many similar customs and legends. So it kind of adds a mystical, you know, people write fantasies all the time. And this is, for me, was a fantasy. Oklahoma is a very red state. It's a very work hard, do this, do that. And I thought, what if it had a really strange and wonderful place where all this could happen? And I wanted to mix the pragmatic with the fantastical. And that's why I address the readers like that. And I also have great respect for people who take care of the dead. And particularly during COVID, you know, the challenges were just unreal. So I wanted to express that up front, but then say, just read the book and have fun. And thank you for asking.
I think there's a time and place for that. You know, for me, the way I went was I made absolutely everything as 100% historically accurate as it could possibly be.
Okay.
And to me, I think that's a thing that helps. And I'm assuming that most of everything else in there is somewhat, you know, realistic. I mean, for instance, you talk about actually knowing a mortician who is also a psychic. So did part of the genesis of this book come from your friend's experiences?
No, I found her, I follow her on Instagram, but she did let me know that her experiences are not literal. You know, she doesn't hear them say la 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 la, but she picks up on everything, and that did play into the character that I created, because I wanted her to be someone who's very pragmatic and professional. She'd served in the military at Dover Air Force Base, where all the dead bodies come. And then she runs her own funeral home. And all of a sudden, she taps into the magic vibe of this town, this setting that she's in, where her heritage is. And she begins to hear things, especially from a murder victim, that she doesn't understand, but she knows she needs to say something about it to the law enforcement people who are trying to solve the murder.
And right there would be an interesting story, how that evolves. I have one quick question, you know, before we run out of time on this. You make a comment in your bio online about growing up as a military brat that made you a keen observer of your surroundings. And do you think or why do you think that military brats, of which I am one, why do you think that we become more keen observers of our surroundings perhaps than others?
Well, I think, as you know, you've done this, you move, you go into a situation, you don't know anyone, it's like jumping rope. You got to know the right time to jump in. And whether that group, you want to jump their rope or you want to go with somebody else, or you just want to stay to yourself, you have to be really clued in, or you can make some big mistakes and get in with the wrong crowd, or, put your trust in people that really don't deserve it. And I think it makes us cautious and it makes us observant. And I think it gives you some people skills along the way.
Yeah, I think it does too, and I think I'll just make the comment because we're really out of time on this section that we've interviewed a fair number of authors who were military brats. And, that might be because I sometimes look on, books by brats to find authors, but it does seem to me that the two go well together. And I think that you're right. That's the big reason why we observe, and a writer has to observe. So, Michael, we are ready for beer number 2. I thought this was going to be where darkness was, to be honest.
Oh, no. So you're going to like this one too, Laura. This is a day full of beers that you will like, I think.
Oh, my lucky day.
So the second beer to pair with this reading is Paulaner Salvator.
Oh, Chris told me I would not like this one.
Oh, no, I think you'll love it.
The experts have a difference of opinion. We will see who knows beer.
Yeah, I think you're going to love it. It's super malty and delicious. So Salvator is the original Doppelbock, which is appropriate because we are in Lent, and Doppelbock was created
Michael, keep talking because this beer...
You're making a mess.
You better have a lot to say.
Doppelbock was created by the Paulaner monks to sustain them through the Lenten fast.
Oh.
So they drank beer to get through the Lenten fast. And there was actually a guy in Iowa, a beer writer in Iowa, who tried that. So he had a brewery make him a special Doppelbock, and he went through the Lent fasting except for drinking beer, and he survived.
My goodness.
But so I paired this beer to this reading because I am a foodie. I love food. I love cooking.
Good.
I just think constantly about food. And in this reading, there's this description of gypsy stew and the smells of pork and paprika and pumpkin. And it was just making me hungry and wanting to go cook. And so it's a pairing. So I thought, well, in my imagination, what this tastes like, what would I pair to it? And I thought a Doppelbock might be the perfect thing. And Paulaner Salvator is a little more kind of caramely Doppelbock than some of the others. So that's the one I picked.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.
See what you think, Laura.
This is one that I think would be a little bit more of an acquired taste than bad, but I think I would like it. I think if
if you really just were sipping it, you would go, oh yeah, this is pretty good. Because it's all about malt, and you like the malt.
Yeah, and it's always interesting when you describe them and the flavors in them. Then instead of just drinking it, I'm actually paying attention and trying to see, can I taste those flavors in it? And I confess most of the time I can't. But I keep trying, So we're ready for reading number 2.
Perrie pulled her mother's old black Cadillac into the driveway of her Aunt Azalea's fieldstone cottage. She saw her aunt and Lurleen Cookson sitting together on the front porch swing. "Good evening," they called in unison. Aunt Azalea got up and opened the screen door. "Come on in." Inside, a rustic black linen cloth covered the round dining table, which was set with 3 places, and featured a centerpiece anchored in a black ceramic vase of branches from a persimmon tree, orange fruit intact. Black votive candles made lights and shadows flicker on the walls. "How lovely," Perrie exclaimed, and handed her aunt a bottle of Malbec. Lurleen proffered a corkscrew and opened the wine, then poured it into 3 large goblets. Here's to the truth, Azalea proposed. Perrie's hands grew damp with nervous sweat. Truth? Truth about what? She asked, sipping wine. Truth is not about anything, Lurleen said. Truth is always present in the form of the goddess Veritas, or Ishtar, or Mot, whatever you choose to call her. She smiled at Perrie. We hope she speaks with you tonight. The aroma of pork simmered in paprika wafted from the kitchen, giving Perrie an excuse to change the subject. Your famous gypsy stew? She asked Aunt Azalea. You guessed it. Thought you might be in the mood for some comfort food, especially after your experience today. Have a seat. Azalea passed the plates, and Lurleen filled each with the fragrant stew brimming with chunks of acorn squash, pumpkin, pork, and Swiss chard. I didn't realize how much I've missed your cooking, Aunt Azalea, Perrie said. My dear, you're just reawakening. I suggest that your experience with our Jane Doe today confirms that, in fact, you are awakening in new ways, said Aunt Azalea. Yes, Lurleen said. Azalea tells me that the dead girl spoke with you. What did she have to say? Perrie chewed a mouthful and tried to digest what was happening. Azalea and now Lurleen were telling her that her gift was coming to fruition. She took a deep breath and put down her fork. Did she tell you her name? Lurleen asked. No, it wasn't like that, Perrie said. But when I looked at her, it was as though her face came to life. Her lips were full and they moved. Did you hear a voice, dear? Azalea put her hand on Perrie's forearm. Not exactly. The lips moved, and in my mind she said, see me, know me. Lurleen leaned closer to Perrie, her hazel eyes wide. I wonder what she meant by that. What are we supposed to know? Shh, Lurleen. Azalea frowned and shook her head. This is Perrie's gift. It's not a cipher. Go on, dear. Perrie hesitated. I didn't know what to do, what to believe. Then it was over. Azalea sat quietly with her eyes closed. You had clairaudience, I believe. The young girl spoke to you, and only you. Come on, couldn't I just be sleep-deprived, or couldn't the lights have been playing tricks on me? I don't think so, Perrie. When you were a girl, you used to put cotton balls in your ears when you went downstairs in the funeral home. Don't you remember? Not really. I just remember that I concentrated on the physical bodies. It took a lot of mental energy, but with Mama's help, I learned to clean and dress and prepare bodies. Your mother knew you had a gift, and she taught you to block the voices. You could ignore them because you have a strong mind. You could focus on the job and turn your back on spirit. But now, spirit is calling you to pay attention.
So, Aunt Azalea, fascinating.
Yes.
Lurleen, what drew you to combine the ideas of clairaudience, mortician, and mysteries?
Mm-hmm. Pardon me?
What drew you to combine the ideas of clairaudience, a mortician, and mysteries?
Because I think some of the morticians that I interview say that they're not psychic per se, but there are times when they feel something or hear something and they're working and they know it's about the person. They don't necessarily know what it is. But clairaudience is the ability to hear voices or sounds that are from the dead, that are not just natural sounds. And I think I wanted to show that Perrie doesn't just hear and sense things, but she has all the senses going on when it comes to being in touch with the dead and what their story is. So she's very in touch with their stories.
Has she been aware before now that this gift runs in her family? Because I believe it was in the sample, unless it was in the reading, where she puts cotton balls in her ears. And so she must have known at some point that she was hearing things, but she was a child and maybe didn't know what was going on. So was she aware that this ran in her family?
Her mother and father. Her father was a medical examiner, And so he's very scientific. And he's the one who built the morgue in the funeral home, a separate area. But he would be able to autopsy bodies there that would take too long if they sent them out of town. So he's very, very scientific. And her mother was very, very professional as a mortician. When you deal with bodies, this is how you do it. So they didn't want her to tune in to Aunt Azalea's woo-woo. They wanted her only to stay in the scientific world because they didn't want their funeral home to have a reputation of having someone who could speak to the dead, or the child in the funeral home can hear the dead. I mean, that would just mean terrible things for them in the community. So
I can see that. Yeah, that would freak a lot of people out.
Yeah.
You've won some awards for some of your short stories. Can you tell us about one or two of your favorite short stories?
Oh my goodness. These were years ago when I didn't have time to write novels as raising little kids. The Tulsa County Library has a short story contest every year, and I've won a couple of years. One of them was a short story about contacting a ghost appearing to someone. And then the other one was the Oklahoma State Short Story Prize of 2013. And it was for the origin story of Perrie Spock when she was in high school. And she was working in the funeral home, and one of her teachers comes in who's been in a car accident, and some things that take place there. So
did this Perrie Spock Mysteries, did this grow out of short story originally?
Yes, it did.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going the opposite way with my 5-book series. I still plan on writing a series of short stories of some of the peripheral characters because they speak so loudly to me. So coming up, we'll actually be hearing from your debut novel, Beneath the Wild Blue. Being raised in the Air Force, I thought that was a great title. But for those who did not grow up like military brats, knowing the words to every branch's song, the significance of that title.
The significance of that title?
Yeah.
Well, up we go into the wild blue yonder, That's what I've got the words in here, and my dad used to sing it as a joke sometimes in the car. He'd just start singing it,
Well, and of course, your dad was a test pilot, whereas my dad had his license. He could fly, and in fact, some of my earliest memories are of being up in a plane with him, one of the little 2-seater things. And this is kind of a funny story. He thought it was hilarious when I'm like 4.5, 5 years old. I'd be sitting in the other seat holding holding the control, and he'd take his hands off and go, "You're in charge."
Oh no.
And as a 4-year-old, and instead of just realizing if you just hold the thing straight, nothing happens, I'd be doing this.
Oh my gosh.
I can't fly. And then of course the plane starts doing this. So
that's good training for your what do you call it? The water skiing stuff that you just did.
Right.
Jet skis, yeah.
Yeah. So to your dad, Off You Go Into the Wild Blue Yonder is particularly significant. My dad did weather, and later he did manpower. So his main job was not flying. That was a side thing that he just enjoyed. But I think we are perhaps ready for beer number 3.
Okay. Wow, that went fast. So this last beer is from Founders Brewing Company in Michigan, and it is called Mas Agave. And it is a margarita-inspired beer. And the reason that I picked it is because this reading takes place at a big margarita party.
Yes, it does.
Where apparently pitcher after pitcher of margaritas are being made and consumed.
Yeah.
So
the Air Force wives are into their margaritas. It's good.
Yeah, I figure you got to go with margaritas. I have never had this beer. I do not have this beer in front of me. So Laura, you're going to have to describe it.
Okay.
And you have 2 versions of it. I know there's a lime version, which is the original, and I don't know what else you have.
Yeah, you didn't specify, and this one's going to foam up really fast too. So let me pour it before it pours all over me.
Yeah, I didn't realize there were multiple versions.
Well,
Bad Cicerone.
Yeah, you seem determined to get me drunk tonight. So that was the prickly pear I just poured.
Oh, prickly pear.
I bet that's
Yeah,
good.
prickly pear. I'm looking forward to trying that. Grapefruit, I cannot.
Oh, neither of those are the original. The original is lime.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
You're just all over the map today, Laura.
what?
You're just
I'm
all
all
over the
over
map today with your beers.
Well, we bought a lot of beers. So here goes the grapefruit. And let's hold this up. Here's the prickly pear. Here's the grapefruit, which is still pretty foamy. So what's your guess? Am I going to like it, hate it, somewhere in between?
I do not know. I mean, do you like margaritas?
I love margaritas.
You're
Yeah,
gonna
well,
like it.
you might then, because this is it's supposed to be a margarita inspired beer. So
Well, and you have actually found a number of beers I like. So let me keep this straight. This is the prickly pear. Buy that over there. That's good.
I told you, I thought today was
Right.
going
I
to
think
be
you
a
found
day
one you can
that
stick with, right?
Yeah, I think so. We've had very few days where I like all three beers.
Mhm.
It's almost unheard of. And in this case, I've got more like 6 or 8. Okay, so that's the prickly pear. That's good. It's definitely fruity. This one I can taste the flavor in it. So here goes the grapefruit. You should know I hate grapefruit. So
Oh, well, you might not like this one then.
I think it's going to be a little different in beer than, straight grapefruit. I do kind of like that.
All right.
I think I definitely like the prickly pear better, but that's not bad.
All right. 6 for 6.
6 for 6. It's a good
No,
night.
let me count it. 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I have 6 beers here, but I didn't try the third. What was this, darkness? I didn't try the blueberry darkness.
Well, you can let me know later what you thought of that.
I will do that. We'll post it on the blog. I suspect I'm going to like it. I mean, I can't go wrong after all these were so right. So and we're ready for the reading from Beneath the Wild Blue.
This reading is from my first novel called Beneath the Wild Blue, the story of a 1950s Air Force family and an Air Force wife named Fritzie Stoddard. She and her husband have just moved to Sandia Air Force Base in New Mexico. Fritzie and Joe live in an old adobe house with a walled patio and off-base rental. Fritzie has never lived anywhere but Louisiana, and she loves the dry air and exotic food and drink in New Mexico, especially the margaritas. On the first Friday evening of the month, Joe would join the other young officers at the club for beer call, a happy hour that extended long into the night. The men would smoke cigars, play pool, and eat hamburgers in the men-only officers' grill. Fritzie says, "That's fine if you want to go out with the boys. I'll just make plans with the girls." So she borrows Joe's duty roster and calls all the young wives in the squadron, inviting them over for margaritas on the patio on Friday. They are to bring hors d'oeuvres and any children too young to stay home by themselves. Only 7 of the 22 wives showed. Fritzie greets them in a fiesta dress she'd bought in Old Town, with her toddler son Rand at her side. Most of the women wore proper white gloves and prim dresses with petticoats, more suitable for an officer's wife's tea than margaritas on Fritzie's patio. They brought freshly groomed children, 2 babies, not yet walking, a 5-year-old boy with freckles, a yo-yo, and a 7-year-old girl with long braids, 4 toddlers, 3 boys, and a girl. After one of Fritzie's margaritas, or 2, the young mothers removed their shoes and gloves. Sandra Ferguson borrowed her son's yo-yo and began entertaining the group with tricks. Wanda Fuller bounced a baby boy on her lap while eating most of the Fritos and bean dip that Nancy Schulmeyer brought. Wanda's 7-year-old daughter Lucy took charge of the toddlers and made a game of picking up fruit under the apricot tree. Out of the corner of her eye, Fritzie spotted the 5-year-old boy unzip his pants and pee into a flower pot. What the heck, she thought, knowing the kid's mother would swoop down and discipline him if she said anything. Let the kids have a little fun, too. She mixed another batch of margaritas, and another one after that. By 7 p.m., Fritzie was serving peanut butter sandwiches to hungry kids, praying that she didn't run out of Wonder Bread. After the margaritas ran out, Millie Hodges made a beer run and opened bottles of Falstaff to pass around. Sandra Ferguson bummed a cigarette from Helen Patterson, and Wanda Fuller let her baby crawl in the dirt. Fritzie took it all in, knowing that her little get-together had secured her place as queen bee in this particular hive of women, freed by her invitation to laugh and let loose in her backyard.
So, obviously, as we've discussed, I grew up in the Air Force too. One of the first things that hit me, but of course, I grew up, my earliest memories are really of the 70s.
Okay, you're much younger than I am.
This is more like 50s, 60s with.
Yeah, it's 50s, 60s.
And yeah, it really struck me, the contrast in the visuals you paint, this contrast of Fritzie's dress with the white gloves of all the other Air Force wives. And things I had wanted to point out, but of course, in hours, never enough time. You have some really beautiful turns of phrases, like in one of the earlier readings, the billowing of the bed sheets and sliding into sleep like a swimmer in water. Is this something that comes naturally to you, or did you did you do things to work on your writing craft?
I think what I did, Laura, and probably what you do as well, is read everything and get my hands on. Mm-hmm. And you have your favorite writers. You love the way some of their sentences come out, and you kind of want to develop a style of your own. And that's, I think, what really fueled me to try, and a lot of times you'll get feedback from critics or whatever, and they'll say, well, that's kind of purple prose, or that's a little much, but I like to write that way. What the heck? Well, I like sensory details like that.
Right. And that just goes to the fact that some readers are going to love it. You can't please everyone.
Right. Can't please everyone.
I love alliteration, and I've been accused of using alliteration too much. So.
I love alliteration.
I do too.
Although when I use it, I tend to use it humorously. I'm working on a book right now. I probably can't call it the IHOP affair, but we use a lot of alliteration as humor in it. It's based on a true story of what really happened to me at IHOP one night.
Oh no, how funny.
But of course, in the writer's imagination, it turns into not merely, why didn't the stupid waitress tell me they didn't have soup for 20 minutes? Like I was sick, I needed my soup. I still had 5 hours to drive that night.
Oh, but you had a carafe of coffee to help, right?
I needed soup. I was actually coming home from a writer's event in Florida, and it was like 10 at night, and I was starting to come down with a cold, and I just needed chicken noodle soup. Yeah. My son got his steak, and 20 minutes later, she's like, oh, we're out. So in the writer's mind, it's like, why would you wait 20 minutes? Obviously, because there's a murder going on in the kitchen.
Oh, yeah, right.
See? The
timeline does not, that's good. Right. Very good.
It couldn't just be that the waitress didn't tell me. So there has to be a reason. So we're having a lot of fun working on that. There's a lot of alliteration. Anyway, so you grew up in the military. You were the child in the family, but you've written this story about the wife. How do you shift from the mindset of the military brat to the military wife?
I'm very, very lucky. My mom was a military Air Force wife. She had this book called The Air Force Wife, and it's a handbook. I would call it the Emily Post for the military set. And it would let, and you talk about the ladies wearing, usually they'd wear white gloves and dressy dresses and all that. That was, when you go out, you dress a certain way. You represent the Air Force. You are part of our team. You don't do anything that would get your husband in trouble. You don't associate with people who might, put a stain on the Air Force or your husband's mission. And so it was very much, and my mom she did all that stuff. She was dutiful, but she also was her own person. And she would laugh at this Air Force wife book, and she'd get it out for my sister and me and go, listen to this. And, so in the book, Beneath the Wild Blue, I go from different viewpoints. The main one is the mother, who's from the South. And my mother was from the South. It's based very much on my mom, but it is not my mom. And then I do viewpoints of the 4 children in the Air Force family, because each child has a different memory of how they grew up. And each child experiences a move in a different way. Some just roll right through it, make friends easily. Some just really struggle. And the mom of the family back then, the dad was gone all the time. You have these children who are moving, who are in crisis or not, and you got to manage all that stuff. And I thought that's a juggling act I wanted to honor and portray. Because my mom was a little bit of a rabble rouser too. She'd say, I'm wearing a fiesta dress, I'm going to do that instead of that, so that's where that came from. And thanks for asking.
So, the blurb on Amazon says Fritzy becomes the quintessential Air Force wife. And I heard some of my mother's comments about the other officer's wife.
Oh, yeah.
We've talked with Sandy Hanna, who wrote The Ignorance of Bliss in America.
Yes, I loved that book. Her book was great.
That's a fantastic book.
Mm-hmm.
I should go read that again. And she talks about what it is to be, I believe it was a successful Army wife. So, apart from, say, the white gloves, being careful who you associate with, what would you say are some of the qualities that define the quintessential Air Force wife?
Well, I think it goes way beyond dressing right and showing up right and being in the Officers' Wives Club. I think it goes into what I saw in my family. Military families are always prepared. They're prepared to move. They're prepared to
We got bug out bags in Germany during the Cold War.
Yes. And they're prepared even, for their loved one to go to war. They're prepared for that knock on the door that says,
my dad was in Vietnam when I was born.
My dad was in Korea when I was born.
Yep.
So yeah, there we are. And my dad was flying bombing missions in Korea. So
that's
anyway,
nerve-wracking.
Brett, they're just, military families are prepared for all of that. But what happens when a military family has a personal tragedy in their family, a death that's not expected or within their realm of operation? Because they're always prepared. They're always like, okay, we're going to do the next thing, that. Mm-hmm. And we are happy to have this life because it educates us and it sends us all over the world, and it gives us the opportunities to understand people and learn new languages and do all these things. But what happens when that family is faced with a tragedy? Do they go into free fall, or do they somehow figure it out? And what I witnessed growing up was that when a family had a crisis, the Air Force wives were there, even if you didn't know each other very well, even if you just moved on base, even if, you supported each other in, and I'm just going to say sisterhood, because back in my day, all the women were the wives and the men were the people were the fly boys. No, so
right.
It's what in the Air Force wife, the writer says, it's the esprit de corps. It's like, we're in this together and we're part of the Defense Department, basically. If we don't help each other, then our guys who are out there fighting the Cold War can't do their best job either. So exactly. There was a big emphasis on that. The kids, we were always taught too, you show up a certain way, you're in public, you act a certain way in a foreign country, you never be an ugly American, you represent us, and that's a big deal. Yep. So
we were definitely taught that. But, I see that even now, one of my sons is in the Marines. Well, he just got out, but, you're never an ex-Marine.
Yeah.
One of them is in the Army, and I even see this among the mothers of the Marines, that we have groups on Facebook. And for instance, I believe it was last summer, one of the Marines from Minnesota died in a drowning accident in Tokyo, and everybody was there. When they were coming home with their son on the bus, bridges were lined, the mothers of Marines were there on the side of the road, families of Marines. So it's, it's the Air Force, it's all the branches, because we're experiencing something that other people aren't. I mean, just this past weekend, two of my sons, the Marine and the Army soldier, were home, and two of their friends, one of whom is a Marine who guards embassies.
Oh,
that was actually very hard on me because all I could think was this is a guy who's served at embassies in the Middle East and I think Africa, he said. He doesn't know what his next assignment is yet. But, here I am as the mother of a soldier and a Marine saying, my son was just deployed to Fort McCoy. He's not going to be deployed again, thank goodness. But then I go, and yet what I'm really saying is let it be somebody else's son.
Of course.
There's somebody else's son sitting at my table. That's very hard, and that is what it is to be in the military, that the people who are going to die.
Well, especially now, because we have an all volunteer military. And I lived during the time when the draft, my dad would fly troops over to Vietnam in the big C5s. And he would cry because I had an 18-year-old brother. And he would fly their body bags back. And, there's just such a waste of human effort when all that happens, yet it's noble. They serve their country and they had to because they were drafted, but your sons chose to serve and we honored that. And, especially now.
It's not a fun thing to face. It was a lot easier during the Cold War when basically nobody was dying, but all of a sudden, it's different. Yeah. So anyway, we're pretty much at the end of our hour here. I wish that we could do like a 2 or 3 hour program because we've got plenty to talk about.
Well, I'll be happy to come back.
We would love that. I actually have another show I should invite you on that. I should try and find the time to do it where I have the full hour and I can talk about a lot of things. But in the meantime, where can people find you online? I'm
MarionMcCarthy.com. And that's Marion, Marian, McCarthy, McCarthy. And then I'm on Marion McCarthy author, Facebook and Instagram. And I think that's about it. I try not to be too spread out. So,
Michael, where are you and where are we?
I am at aperfectpint.net and aperfectpint on the socials that I don't pay any attention to. We are at booksandbrews.net, Book and Brews on Instagram, and Books and Brews with Laura Wosika and Michael Agnew on Facebook. And then we're something or other on YouTube that I don't know.
I looked it up. It's on there.
Yeah, it is, but they no longer allow you to give a personalized name. So it's like a string of letters. So there is no way. But if you look up Books and Brews, there are several sites that come up, and we're one of them. We're the one with the standing by a sign. I am at lauravosika.com, and I'm at laura.vosika.author on Facebook, and sometimes I update that. I'm on Instagram, and I don't really even know what I am. Laura Vosika, I haven't been on there in like a year and a half or something because, although I've argued with God about this, he insists on giving me only 24 hours in a day, like everybody else. And, we go back and forth, and I haven't swayed him yet to give me an extra 15 or 20. So
no TikTok, huh?
Definitely no TikTok. Marion, do you have any upcoming events that you would like readers to know about?
Well, I think we're just now blooming out of COVID. So I have spoken at many military bases, and that was an honor and a great privilege. But now that I'm really just a mystery writer, I don't have anything coming up, but I do have a book coming out probably this fall in time for Halloween. And it's called Murder and the Ghost Hunter. And it will be a Perrie Spock last responder mystery, all about the legend of a mysterious owl woman that stalks people at a certain time of year.
So, I also have no events coming up. Apart from, we are in mid-March. Within the next month, Chris and I will start tapping our birch trees, and then that will be on our YouTube site, Wordsmiths and a Wolfhound.
Nice.
I just released a book of short stories called Tales Beyond Our World, which is of mysterious things, sort of like your mysteries. And Gabriel's Horn is accepting submissions for new poetry in traditional forms, and the theme this year is laughter. So, Michael, do you have any upcoming events?
No.
No tastings, no pairings.
I don't do like those are not public events that I can invite people to. They're private events. So
But they're
I don't have
events.
any public. I never have any public events.
So the final question of the evening is,
Who is our guest next month?
I thought you'd never ask. It is Alison Mann. So interestingly, this is just by dumb luck. We seem to get our writers in interesting groupings where we'll have a couple poets in a row, a couple of similar types of. This month, we are going from a mystery novel to an author of true crime. So
Ooh.
we have Alison Mann, who is an author of true crime. She is a publisher and paralegal from the Twin Cities. After co-authoring her first book, The Girls Are Gone, which is a true story of two girls who disappear, Alison also became a publisher, co-founding, I hope I say this right, Hadley House Publishing. She lives in the Twin Cities with her family, enjoying her life. This is from her bio, as a boy mom and all that comes with it. I'm assuming that means she is the mother of boys. And being the mother of 7 boys, my first reaction is all that if it is numerous trips to the ER and having your kid airlifted to the head trauma unit.
Oh,
That I have any experience with boys.
you need those beers.
I have
I
some
do.
friends that I should alert to this episode because they're like crazy into true crime.
Yep, let them know it's coming up.
Yeah. Well then, Marion, I want to thank you for joining us here for
Thank you.
episode 36. And I want to thank everybody out there for joining us here for episode 36. And tell your friends, get them to tune in. This has been episode 36 of
Got
the
it,
Boots and
too.
Brews podcast. Cheers.